more about her practice, things that she's been doing before Women in Their Work, and things that have been going on during the residency. Brianna is an artist and designer, newly based in Austin. Her creative practice focuses on creating objects and ephemera. She has received her BFA in furniture design and fiber and material studies from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Brianna, and Brianna can tell us a little bit more about herself and walk us through her practice. So go ahead and take over screen sharing whenever you're ready, Brianna.
Okay, I'm going to do that. As soon as you stop screen sharing, okay, for me. All good. Share. Okay, can everyone see my screen, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, thank you, Allie, for that introduction. Like she said, my name is Brianna McIntyre. I am originally from St. Louis, Missouri, but I did a lot of my studying in the DC area at the University of Maryland, and then I completed my education at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I will be addressing a lot of my work today. Mostly, I will be touching on some of my design and object work, but I really want to focus on my research as well as where my work is headed now. So I'm gonna go next. First and foremost, I want to dedicate this presentation, this residency to my mother. This was the 10-year anniversary of her leaving me this past November, and everything I do to make her proud. So I hope she's proud. So a lot of this residency was about taking a step away initially from making and having just the chance to think. I know I can speak for myself in saying that art doesn't start just by drawing always. Sometimes it starts in what you're reading. It starts in the research. It has to have a core to it at first. And I really started to take root in understanding what I was doing with my work when I started to read this book. If you haven't heard this book before, I recommend reading it, and Everything by Octavia Butler. She has a lot of famous quotes that come out of this book, and scarily enough, she kind of predicted a lot of the political climate that we're dealing with today. I won't spoil everything, but it's definitely a good read, and I would go and investigate that. So first, what I'll do is I'll read this quote here. Darkness gives shape to light, as light shapes the darkness. Death gives shape to life, as life shapes death. The universe and God share this wholeness, each defining each other. God gives shapes to the universe, and the universe shapes God. So what I liked about this quote is it reminded me a bit of this kind of idea of call and response, these entities that live and are defined by their antithesis, right? So there's darkness, there's light, there's death, there's life, and how a lot of my existence as a Black woman is always defined against the other, or I am the other, defined against whiteness. And I thought that that was a really great quote to kind of frame how I'm thinking about what my work does for myself and hopefully what it does for others. We'll go to the next slide. This is a great quote, very famous by Octavia Butler. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So this picture here, this image here is a picture of my phase shelf. As if you've been following my journey, this residency, you know that I was making a lot of these shelves. It's not a new design. It's something that I designed about 2 years ago, but I haven't had the chance to make it, the space or the facilities. Thankfully, I was able to buy some tools that allowed me to make these, but more so than just the chance to make these shelves again, I was really trying to think about how these spoke to me and how they spoke to the audience. Uh, the name for it, phase, is, you know, essentially what it is. It's talking about change. It's talking about shifts. And this definitely feels like a moment of shifting and change. Um, I feel that America, the world, is feeling the change rapidly. And at times it's really uncomfortable. I know that I've been uncomfortable during this time, but I love that it says that the only lasting truth is change. Things are meant to change. And that's comforting because that is the way that it goes. Change can be very uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be derailing necessarily, but it is important to reflect on that. So I like these shelves, and this is an image from the installation. I was a part of the Austin tours, excuse me, this November before Thanksgiving. And I did an installation where I was trying to use similar language to talk about movement and space and phases and how this shelf is literally like a capture in time. If you think about that, like a snapshot. If you could take and we take snapshots all the time of ourselves. You know, we take selfies, you know, we document our lives, and that's all that it is. It's a moment in time, and moments change. They transform, we change. And it felt really good to kind of articulate what this shelf meant to me. Being one that's gone through great transition in my own life, I know what it's like to struggle with change, but the more that we kind of accept it and the more that we allow it to kind of move through us, it feels less like an attack and more like just how life is shifting us for this moment, because it is a moment. So I don't have too many photos of process, but I do have some good process shots on on my Instagram. So I can share that with anyone who's interested in how I make these shelves. But I really wanted to focus on the concept behind everything today. Something that is really important to me is using cultural and political materials. Some would say like charged materials that represent either my gender, my culture, my sexuality. All of these things have kind of intrinsic meaning that we all tie to them just through our kind of conditioning of society, right? So part of my practice is talking about these conditioned materials and how they can be used in a way to talk about the conditioning itself, but also how it affects society as a whole. And the question, this is a hard question. It says, how does the role of material culture in the, sorry, oopsie. I'm trying to see the slide. There we go. How does the role of material culture aid in the reproduction and transformation of power? And I think it's a question of, does it? How does it aid, and does it aid? I would say that we are kind of entering a new movement. I would say the second wave of Black power, even if we're not calling it that, it sure definitely feels like that. And I think what we're talking about is the dissemination of power and equality. So I'm gonna also read my artist statement so that you understand a little bit about me. So Much of my fibers and furniture design exhibits characteristics of duality and precariousness. Using fiber and sculpture as my primary mediums, I form a language that dissects the concept of stability and control from a societal and personal perspective. These works allude to the body in precarious scenarios, all while evoking narratives of personal philosophy, politics, and my identity as a Black woman. So right here on the right, this image is from my hair composition series. This was actually secondary to another project that I'll go to next, but this was kind of a response of just, again, just creating different forms, trying to understand what it means to take these objects and put them in different spaces, create different forms with them. So here we have synthetic hair. It's actually my friend's hair she took out, but I went through and I wrapped it in yarn and tried to create these loops of connection, almost in a way, and this is also hair right here. This is hair, I wrapped that around that. And in a way, I was finding ways to feel like close to her just by creating these objects and also just exploring, what they mean from there. So this was that primary project that I worked on, which led to the composition series. This is around 10 feet tall and comes out around 8 feet here. This material, again, is the same material. It's the brown Kanekalon wrapped with the black Kanekalon wrapped with white yarn. And this piece was very important for my trajectory and understanding what I was doing with these materials. So this piece is called, it's a long one. It's called Visibility is a Trap, Living Life on the Edge of a Bell Curve. So I'm gonna go to my notes here really quickly. So as a Black woman, as a Black child, we learned very quickly the statistics that are associated with our existence. We are understanding of all the odds that we have to face entering into society and all the expectations. And something that I find really beautiful about this piece and compelling is how this white yarn, we see it, but it almost disappears entirely into this background. And that spoke to me about visibility. It spoke to me about my Black skin, another person's Black skin or brown skin, up against a white background, and how that will always be a source of, or not always, I don't want to use that, but it seems to be a source of contention because, we're gonna stand out. I went to a school where I was the only Black girl in my class for a majority of my classes. If I had one of my Black friends in there, we would be pretty happy. But it's always this this Black body up against a white background. And how do we meet that? How do we match it? Do we match it? And I think the question is no. We don't really match that white background because we aren't supposed to. And this again comes around full circle to understanding how to define Blackness outside of whiteness, but that's a really difficult question to ask. So let me see if there's anything else that I want to bring to that point. So yeah, that's this project. So then also just taking more objects and kind of subverting them, more materials. This was started at a time where I was grappling with my own sexuality, my own body, my feelings of beauty or inadequacy, and how, again, it seemed like something that I didn't have control over. So many times, Black women's sexuality is used in a way that doesn't always make them the beneficiary of that exploitation. And I have definitely been subject to that. But more than that, I wanted to create a powerful object that evoked sexuality, but also evoked power in a sense where I could take control of that. So when I was thinking of this, I was originally intrigued by this this fly whisk that the first president of Kenya, he would wave around. I'm blanking on his name right now, but that was a powerful object that he would always bring to every meeting. And, you know, he would smack the table or something to like show power. But I was like, wow, that's really intriguing. And I wanted to kind of, and you know, Black women are also going through their own kind of revolution in how we define our sexuality. And I felt like this is another one that I created. And, you know, not just Black women, Black men too. And what I wanted to do was to just kind of take some of that power back. And by literally creating an object that I could hold, possess, use, and use for my good and not against me. So this material here, this is walnut that's been turned, and this is all synthetic hair, Kanekalon hair. So back to this, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. This is just an image of cotton. I can't think of or see cotton without immediately thinking of Black people and slavery and capitalism. They are tied to us. This material is tied to us in so many ways, so many historical ways in the context of America. So this next piece, oh, never mind, I'm not going to that piece yet. So I'm gonna give a little more context too. So this was also some research that I did. Like I said before, I went to the University of Maryland and in the DC area, and I was studying politics at the time. And I can't separate politics from my own political practice or interests. And thinking about context of this material and thinking about context of America's trajectory and where our moral compass is standing right now, there are two cases that really stand out. So a lot of people don't know of this case, Somerset versus Stewart. This was a case about a slave that was taken to England. This is before, you know, the Revolutionary War. It's taken to England, and at that time, the law stated that if a slave liberated himself or herself, they couldn't be taken back into slavery by their master. So that was a case kind of setting a precedent in England, which what the courts might call a super precedent, right? In England, that and kind of rippled through the colonies, right? So America, when they heard this, I'm sorry, I was moving away from slavery. I forgot that right there. When the American colonies heard this, they were scared because they thought that their way of living, their way of accumulating wealth was threatened by this decision. And in reality, it was, because not soon after that, I think maybe 30 years, actually not even 30 years, like 15 years, England abolished slavery in total. But that also didn't happen for a long time, you know, in America. So when I was thinking about the fact that this case happened, and then 3 years later, the Revolutionary War happened, I think about the fact that it's tied to this. It's tied, like America can't separate itself from this. And in a way, we can't either. And then I also want to talk about this case here. If any of you have heard Bernie Sanders talk or speak, he talks a lot about like getting big money out of politics. You know, this is the case that he's referring to. He's talking about the fact that corporations now can be considered or be given the same rights that I as a citizen would under the First Amendment. And essentially freed them from any kind of limitation on spending they could do for national or local elections, which, as Justice Paul Stevens called it, a rejection of common sense for America to prevent corporations from undermining self-governing. So again, just this constant reminder of what America actually puts first. It's always been about money. It's always been about money. And I think that it's becoming more clear now. I mean, even race is used as kind of a coverall for really what it comes down to is just pure greed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, so this is a great image. Essentially, because of that case, the Citizens United saying that money is a form of money and spending money is a form of free speech from a corporation. But then it begs the question, you know, okay, so the corporation is spending money, but who gets a say in this corporation, right? Do the workers get a say? No. And maybe the workers are actually voting against what the corporation, this new entity that has rights, they might be voting against that because it's not in their self-interest. So this all kind of begs the question of self-interest and where is America kind of like turning itself, and can we get control of this compass? This is a great article that I read today. Thank you, Itanu, also known as Petty Mogul on Instagram. She went on a political rant, which I love, the other day, and she brought up this oh my God. She brought up she brought this up and I thought it was spot on because it's talking a lot about the concepts that I am grappling with right now. Essentially, it's saying that Black people have, well, first, one of the great excerpts that I love from this, it says, Black people have the longest resume in the American economy, but relatively little to show from it. Money can't shield every struggle or pain. Usually, more money, more problems. And we as a people should divest from the false narrative that career and financial success brings any of us closer to true freedom. So it's important to talk about that because in the next piece that I'm going to introduce, it's talking about, again, how we define ourselves as Black people. Are we going to decide to define it in a way that makes this system comfortable? And by doing so, are we trying to get acceptance? And is that a legitimate form of gaining acceptance? So this next piece, which is untitled for now, is something that I created in this residency as well. This material is just cotton piping. And I've been attracted to this material for some time, but I wasn't sure quite what to do with it. And I started kind of in this section here, and then I hung it up, and then the material spoke to me. It started to form a body. So I kind of followed the shape of it. And it's all continuous, it's all one line. And something that was really speaking to me was how Black people, it's hard for Black people to define themselves out of this moment right here, like cotton, economy, capital, and all the ways that, you know, we are still being exploited for the sake of capitalism. Sometimes we allow ourselves to be exploited for the sake of capitalism because we think that we're going to benefit from it in the long run. But what's great about this article it greatly pointed out was it was talking about that famous match with Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka. I think that was her name. but the Black and Japanese tennis player that she met on the court, and Serena Williams, you know, essentially lost that match because the person who was calling that match was clearly trying to check this woman who he thought was showing too much power. Even though there are many scenarios where white tennis players will show aggression, show passion, show disapproval of a call. You know, when a Black woman did it, she didn't know her place. So she needed to be checked. And even someone as great as Serena Williams, you know, the world's greatest athlete, you know, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, inspiring women all over the world. Even she is subject to sexism and racism, and that being a capitalist doesn't escape you from these problems, but at times it can also bring in more problems. So this is a detailed shot of that. So something, again, that I explore a lot in my practice is not only just, you know, not just like cotton and Kanekalon hair, it's also clothing. I'm always trying to create narratives through these charged objects because they speak for us even when we don't. When you see someone walking down the street, their clothes speak to you, you know. Athleisure, you know, is now the sign of wealth because it's essentially you saying that I don't have to try to get respect because it's inherent. I love this quote that I'm going to read right now. I actually got it from my new job. They define comfort because they're trying to sell furniture. So they said comfort is defined as a state of being free from self-awareness, which I think that's great. So I'm gonna read it one more time. Comfort is defined as a state of being free from self-awareness. Now, I would say that America is pretty comfortable because we are pretty free from self-awareness. In fact, that's probably our most loved freedom besides speech. But exactly that, just thinking about all the ways that I'm comfortable, the way that we as a society are kind of battling right now, this fight for either to be comfortable or to confront the problem. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about how we define and talk through our clothing. So this is a project that I did. Let me check on time. Okay, I'm doing okay. So this is a project that I did in Sagatuck, Michigan at Oxbow. I did not have a residency, but I did have a scholarship to go. And I made this outdoor installation. This installation, I'm called the parable of the hidden maiden. So if you can go back to your t-shirts, you can see the tag, you know, maiden, maiden. Where was this maiden? Who was the maiden that made this object? One of the traps of comfort is that we don't understand or sometimes appreciate what it takes, you know, to make something basic like a t-shirt. I challenge anyone to make a t-shirt and then sell it for $5 and see how you feel after that. This was inspired by the women who make our clothing, the women who are hidden from, you know, this capitalist kind of circle, this never-ending circle, it feels like, where it's still, you know, coming back to this material, this cotton, this source of, still to this day, you know, human rights degradation. And I was thinking about how all this clothing that we take in as a society and throw back because we don't value it. We don't value the labor behind it. We don't value the countries who are making it sometimes. We feel very entitled to be able to waste and to throw things away. Here's another image. But yeah, so I'm thinking about all these things, and you know, these boxes that I constructed to float, they have like a little string and a rock tied to them so they don't move. But this was 2016, so this was at the height of the Syrian, or what seemed to be the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. So a lot of people kind of understood this as like bodies or people, which I didn't shy away from, just because I think that our clothing has energy tied to it. You know, this is all energy in the water that's shifting and waiting and trying to catch this boat, trying to go somewhere, trying to be able to benefit from all this. And I think a lot about them now, and I want to continue to talk about this. This is, I think, the start of a great series. But yeah, so I think I have just run out about of time. Yep. So I didn't want to make it too long because I know I only have 30 minutes and I don't want to take up too much time. I appreciate everyone who came. Let me stop sharing.
So we actually have a few questions, Brianna, if you have time to answer those for us.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question that we had was from Rudy Green. It says, St. Louis, Chicago, DC, Austin. This can be a very difficult place for Black women. What is it about the environment here that attracted you?
That's interesting. So Austin did not attract me initially. I had to be a little bit convinced. My partner, who's on this chat, I see you, he is already attending UT Austin. And he convinced me that Austin would be a great place to advance my political career, to be visible. And I think in a weird way, me moving to Austin is kind of like a social experiment. You know, I'm moving to Texas in the middle of a pandemic, political upheaval, you know, all these things, you know, Black revolution, all of these things that are happening and so chaotic. And I think there's no better way to see it all than to be in the middle of it. Something that I noticed that was happening in Chicago was that just like Facebook and Instagram have these algorithms, my day-to-day had an algorithm. I didn't have to see, speak, or interact with people that did not agree with me politically. But where's the growth in that? You know, something that I have thought a lot about recently is just the fact that America has lost its ability to talk and debate. I grew up in debate class. I did poli-sci, so that was my jam. I loved it because it could be very emotional, it could be very intense, but it's about the logic. And I think also a great thing about moving here and doing the work is bringing back humanity into our eyes. Something I've been telling my friends and family is that when you go into this world, you'll see that eye connectivity is down. People don't look at you in your eyes anymore. And it's really sad because we've started to, you know, devalue and dehumanize each other. And we need to remember our humanity. So if anything, I'm here to remind people of my humanity through art.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that. Really appreciate it. And we have a few more questions here. The next one is, How do you think your designs will change as the pandemic progresses and changes what our mind considers normal in our own realities?
That's a great question. My ideas of what I wanted to design have drastically changed over the last 2 years. And especially, within the last 2 months, or I should say, I've been here for about 4 months. Um, so when I was first entering into design, I was like many people obsessed with the chair, thinking about like, oh, how can I make a new chair that makes me lots of money? How can I make something new? And I realized that it was becoming really attached to my ego and becoming really unhealthy. And something that I have been interested in is making objects that are not cheap but attainable and in some form democratic. I want to make pieces like those shelves. All of those shelves are individual. They're like people. You buy one and it's yours. No one's going to have that exact shelf because either the angle will be different, the inflection on the tail will be different, the color might be different. And all of these things for me make it possible for people to own art and function at the same time. And then also just thinking about how can I make my designs more democratic in not just price, but also just function. I don't want to make something that is going to not allow multiple body types to use it. I don't want to make something that feels like my grandmother couldn't use it or like install it herself. I want to make something that feels personal and just more aware of who we are and how we function, because design at the end of the day, people come first. So I'm thinking about ways that I can make our lives better, not harder.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really think that what you said about the pieces being individualized is very interesting, and the way that you're designing for the individual rather than this like straight across the board sort of mass design. I think that's really interesting with the shelves too, that they do really feel like they have their own almost personality with the motion that you create with them. So that's really interesting to hear you talk about. We have a couple other questions if you have time to answer them,
Yeah.
Brianna. It's up to you. Okay. So
Oh, I just saw a question from Emmy.
yeah, a few more in there. Um, okay. This next one I had was, what is the what is an object, either recently or historical, that informs your life and your practice? I also want to speak to that another question that someone asked, if the shelves are available for purchase. They are, and Brianna's contact information is on our website, so you can check that out and contact her directly. And then I'll let you go ahead and answer that question. I can read it again if you'd like.
Yeah, can you read that first one again? Thank you.
Absolutely. So what is an object, either recently or historical, that has informed your life or your practice?
So recently, storage. Storage has been something that's I've been realizing is incredibly important, and is something that isn't explored enough, at least in my mind, like functional storage. So that's something that I've been thinking about. I mean, the chair was one that I thought about a lot for a very long time because I felt that that was my stamp on the universe. Um, but I've been thinking less like that now. Um, and the objects, I mean, I'm really attracted to this whip. I'm really attracted to that because it references so much for me. Um, for me, it references not only just the president of Kenya, but it also references like BDSM. It references like, how one would lament their own sins in the street by like whipping themselves, like, all these like things that can hold different function and different meaning. I'm attracted to those. So I'm still thinking about that. That's a great question because that's where I'm headed. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're still muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I love how those pieces are hanging up on the wall, sort of side by side. I like how they seem like you could yeah, they're behind Brianna there. I like how you could I like how you arrange them and that they seem like you could just grab them off of the wall. I think it refers to the functional aspects that you talk about those pieces, that they are sort of not just for display, they feel functional.
Mm-hmm. They have energy, they have a charge to them, and whoever picks it up will feel a different charge.
Yeah. We have a few more questions if we want to go ahead and just go till 7, if that's okay with you.
I'm open. Let's go like 6:50.
Okay, we'll do 6:50. We'll do one more. Okay. This next one was, in regards to your shelves, does the process of making them and your material choice also speak to the concepts behind the design? You've chosen a material that I imagine is fairly resistant to change and the way you're manipulating it in the process. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about the significance, if any, you see in the process and the material that you've chosen to make this object that could be made with different things in different ways.
Great question. Short answer, yes. So a part of that duality that I'm talking about in my work is by taking materials that want to be in one state and trying to bring them over to another state. So wood by itself is very rigid. The only way that I'm even able to create this shape is to have very thinly sliced veneers, but it is a challenge. And then in that context, but also sometimes in my fibers work, where I'm constantly trying to give structure because that's not where it wants to be. I like to play with it. I like to be a scientist with it. I'm really just a kid in a workshop half the time where I'm like, how can I play with these materials? But again, being in a state that isn't natural to you, I think is a really interesting conversation when you bring materials and material context into it.
Thank you so much for answering that one as well. I like that is making me think a little bit differently about how you are working with the wood and working with the fabrics and the textile materials in a different way. So I think that was a super relevant question. Sorry I didn't get to everyone else's questions, but thank you all for participating. I'll go ahead and save those and just send those to you later, Brianna. I want to thank everyone for being here today. And there's more information about Brianna on the link that was just shared in the chat. And on that Austin studio tour, that second link has Brianna's email address in case you have any questions about the purchasing of the shelves or any of the other pieces. And once again, thank you so much for working with us, Brianna, and making all of these amazing things in the studio and for sharing all of that with us today. And it was really great to hear all of the background and the things that you're thinking about while you're making. Yes. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Holly. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Rachel Stuckey. Thank you, Chris Cowden. Thank you to all the staff at Women in Their Work for taking a chance and believing in the vision. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.